Hi everyone, how y'all doing? What a day it's been at St James's Park today. We were actually supposed to be in Singapore by now, but not going to Singapore. Staying here, just like Alexander Isak. I'm going to get into the story, give you guys a bit of understanding, hopefully a bit of context, maybe tell you a few things you don't know yet. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. I was going to say give me a like if it's the sort of story you want to hear, but it's not the sort of story you want to hear, so make that decision yourself. And I'm sure the comments will follow. But yeah, I'm here at St James's Park today because, as you guys will be well aware by now, Alexander Isak has made it clear to Newcastle that he wants to, these are the words we're using, explore a move away from the football club this summer. Essentially, he's been affected by the informal approach by Liverpool last week. I was stood in this exact spot last Tuesday, 9 days ago, and told you that Liverpool had made an informal approach just as Newcastle were going for Hugo Ekitike. Look, my information is Newcastle were going for Ekitike back then because they were concerned that Issac might go, and at least they had Isak's long-term replacement lined up. You know, he's been called the Diet Issac, the Mini Issac, and at least they had him. And then if Issac was to go, at least they would have been in a position of strength to sell with Ekitike in the building. What Newcastle didn't want to do is Issac forcing their hand to go, and then them left with the Issac money to go and spend, which kind of looks like that might happen now. So look, you're all aware he didn't travel to Singapore this morning on the flight that left at 11 AM from Newcastle. He's been left back. The word from the club is because he's got a thigh injury, and they want to rest it and protect it, and 3 games in 12 days is going to be a lot added to the long haul flight. And look, I think he has got a slight injury there, but the overarching issue here is that Alexander Isak is miffed to be, I don't know if that's the right phrase, but yeah, he's miffed, shall I say. He's frustrated that Newcastle have essentially, 1, not given him a pay rise when he felt he should have had one, and 2, blocked the opportunity last week to speak to Liverpool when that informal approach was made. And you know, he's looking at Ekitike moving to Liverpool, and he's thinking, well, that could have been me. And I know that's difficult for you guys to hear because you're Newcastle diehards and you're like, why would you want to leave Newcastle for Liverpool? But of course Liverpool have got chances of winning the Champions League. Liverpool would pay almost double what he could get here at Newcastle. And you know, I think when you look at the whole Isaac situation as a whole, and I said this in one of the lives I did in Sky Sports earlier, Isaac he's almost outgrown Newcastle. And what I mean by that is his development, his acceleration has gone faster than what Newcastle have. So he's massively improved in the last 3 years, to a point where he's arguably the best striker in the Premier League, alongside probably Haaland. I would argue probably better given his movement and his skill and his pace. But the club haven't progressed as much as that. And look, they're still battling the PSR issues. There's currently no sporting director, there's no acting chief executive, there's no structure there to help get deals over the line, and that's probably part of the reason why you've seen them fail in a number of deals this summer, the likes of Delap and Mbumo and Ekitike, Howson, to name but a few. And I think he's developed at such a rate that Newcastle have struggled to hold on to that. Now, for Eddie Howe, his brilliant man management and his training has helped develop Isaac, and himself and Andy Howe spotted Isaac and wanted to bring him to the football club, and they should be hugely credited for that. But they've developed him in such a way that he's now a top talent. Now I can understand Eddie Howe wants to enjoy the fruits of that labour, and he wants to have him for at least another season. But I suppose there does come a point when a player is agitating, a player is showing his displeasure, you have to make a decision if you sell him or you keep an unhappy player going into the season. And this is the point that Newcastle have come to in this. Now, I spoke to a few of you guys in Glasgow on Saturday after the Celtic friendly, and I said, look, there's an issue there with Alexander Isak, but it's really difficult because you don't want to go too big on air about it or online, because the last thing you want to do is feel like you're adding fuel to the fire, or you're causing a problem, or you're taking it to a situation where it's too far to get back from. But I'm not saying this can't be clawed back, but I think once a player agitates like that and says I want to explore a potential move elsewhere, Liverpool or the club of course that made the approach, it's difficult to come back from that. The only way I see Newcastle coming back from it is if they offer him more money and then come to some kind of agreement, whether it be a release clause or a gentleman's agreement that he can leave for a certain amount of money next summer. Now whether that's 80 million, 90 million, 100 million, I don't know, I'm surmising. But he's going to only have 2 years left in his contract next summer, so it won't be quite as valuable as he is now. And I think the only way to try and placate him and to try and calm the situation down a bit will be for Issac to come to an agreement with the club that he can go next summer. But you know, by then he's 26, knocking on 27. Remember, he turns 26 next month. I think Eddie Howe said something crucial after the game against Celtic on Saturday, and I said this in my video, and he said, I'm aware football is a short career. So that's obviously something that's being verbalised or communicated to him by either Issac or his agent, or Issac and his agent, that look, I've only got a few years left at the top, I want to earn as much money as I can. I know I can get probably double the money elsewhere at Liverpool. I want to win the Champions League. Newcastle aren't going to win the Champions League. Yes, they're in it this year. In many ways, Newcastle being in the Champions League has made this whole situation worse, because I think a lot of people thought if Newcastle get Champions League, that's it, he's going to be content for next season, but he's still not getting the wages he feels he believes he deserves, should I say. And I said this a couple of times last season when Newcastle won that trophy. There was a little, for me, a fear that there could be a feeling from some of the players that was box ticked. We've done what we've come here to achieve. We've brought a trophy back to Newcastle after 7 long decades. Now I should be allowed to move on, and it feels a little bit like that with Issac. He helped him beat Liverpool. Ironically, Liverpool in the final scored the winning goal. That goal will go down in folklore for you guys, although weirdly I actually think the Dan Burn one's probably the one that you guys remember more. But the winning goal at Wembley to end your trophy heartache, and then literally 4 months later he's potentially on his way to Liverpool again. Now look, Liverpool need to formally bid. They haven't done that. They need to have the money to afford that. That's questionable. They've already broken the Premier League transfer record to sign Florian Wirtz. They've signed Ekitike last week. Can they do it again? I don't know the ins and outs of their transfer kitty. So what I'm hearing is they'll probably have to sell first before to make a huge money move for Alexander Isaac. Remember, Newcastle have said that he's worth £150 million. Now, I don't think it would take 150 to get him out. I think probably something like 120 plus add-ons, 130, something like that. But again, it's going to be a Premier League record, and it'll be a big deal for Liverpool to try and do. You would suggest they're probably going to have to sell Luis Diaz to do that. Look, I think it's common knowledge that they would allow Nunez to go. There's been no buyers so far. Harvey Elliott's another one that could leave, but Diaz is the big one. They could bring in big money for Diaz, and that would potentially allow them to then go and make an effort for Issac. But it will seem ridiculous that I was stood here 9 days ago saying Newcastle could have Issac and Ekitike, and I thought that might be the case potentially for one season before Issac went next season. And now it's so typical being a Newcastle United fan for you guys that I'm now stood here 9 days later delivering the news that you might have neither of them, and Liverpool of all clubs are going to have both. So look, it's a really difficult day. I know it's hard for you guys to get your heads around. It must feel a little bit like the Andy Cole situation. The one solace I would take in this is, at least if he was to go, you're going to bring in huge money that you can then go and reinvest. You know, you could then go and buy 3 players. You could buy a replacement striker. You could then go and buy a goalkeeper and a centre half as well, and you can actually strengthen the squad. And the last thing you want to do, as I've touched on already, is go into the season with an unhappy striker. So either the player and the club get together and put their heads together, and they come to some kind of agreement that placates him a little bit and makes him feel a bit more content going into the season. And look, time can do that. Time is a healer. I might be stood here in 2 weeks' time, and he might have just calmed down. He might be feeling a little bit different about it. But look, if Liverpool are to come in for Issac, it has to be quickly. Like, the last thing you want is this dragging on to the end of the transfer window and he goes and then you're not left with enough time to get a striker in. Now, we've said this evening, and you've probably seen it in other outlets as well, that there is an interest in Benjamin Sesko. I don't think it's definitely not Newcastle's first choice, absolutely not their first choice, but look, they need to start looking elsewhere to try and bring a replacement for Issac in. They need to be aware and alert to the fact that Issac could potentially go if they struggle to get his head in the right place. So Sesko's one. Remember, you've missed out on a number of players already, and then of course you're in talks with Johan Vissa at Brentford as well. Now, I'm told that one's progressing well. There is hope and expectation that will get done. One bid of £25 million turned down. They're in talks now over a deal for about £35 million. But of course, Brentford know Newcastle are desperate, which isn't helping the situation. However, the player has made it clear he wants to move to Newcastle. He's not interested in Spurs, he's not interested in Nottingham Forest. It's Newcastle he wants to go to, and the two clubs just need to come to some kind of agreement. I'm not expecting like a number of bids to go in and be rejected. I think they'll sit down and come to an agreement. I would expect some kind of movement there over the weekend is what I'm hearing. So Vissa sounds like it's fairly close. He's absolutely not a replacement for Alexander Isak. He's seen as the number 2 striker, and again, he's not the first choice, is he? Because Ekitike was going to be the number 2, so was Delap. But look, they've had to turn their attention to try and get someone in, and at least with Vissa, 19 Premier League goals. He scores goals in the Premier League, he knows what he's doing, he's been around the block, he's experienced, he's a good lad, he's a hard worker, he ticks a lot of boxes. He's the sort of under the radar forward I think could actually do well here. And I think it's, sometimes these lesser arrivals, there's less pressure on them. So I actually think it'd be a good bit of business to bring him in. But just going back to the Issac situation, look, there has been a problem for a long time now. And a lot of us guys don't really want to put it out there because we don't, there's been frustration on his part. You don't want to upset the apple cart, but clearly it's out there now. And it's now just a case of what do the club do next? Where do they go? Do they let him go and reinvest? I spoke to a few fans today who said, look, let's just do that. What is the point in keeping him if he's not going to be 100% on it? It's just a shame it's Liverpool. It's just a shame he scored against Liverpool in the cup final and it's them. But what do? I just can't believe that Liverpool are going to have Issac and Ekitike. It's incredible next season. I think Newcastle were frustrated last week because they could have almost accepted having Ekitike if Issac went, but not having either of them, and Liverpool having both, it must be a really, really bitter pill to swallow. So that's where we are. I wouldn't say it's definitely over. Newcastle will try to bring him round. Eddie Howe's an incredible man manager. He will rely on those powers. But now that it's out there and it's common knowledge, it feels difficult. It would feel difficult for him to stay now. There would need to be a lot of kind words and apologies and time to heal, and there's not time to heal in this transfer window, is there? So anyway, that's it from me, guys. Not the best. However, you could have, in the space of a week or two, you could have Vissa in, whether it's Sesko or someone else. You're going to have 2 strikers going into the season. Yes, it's not going to be the club's first choice, but look, there's money there to spend. There's going to be even more money to spend once Issac goes, if he goes. And it's still a decent position to be in. But as you can imagine, the mood around the club at the moment is just pretty mixed. Like, it is what it is. It doesn't look great, but this is modern day football, and as Eddie said, I'll go back to it again, players have short careers, and I think he understands it from Isac's position, but that doesn't mean they won't try and keep him. So let's see what happens, guys. Issac, he's been here 3 years. He's not just been here 1 year. It was always a stepping stone for him. He's accelerated beyond all reason, quicker than the club could have thought, and it always felt like this point might come. I thought maybe they'd get 1 more year out of him because you're in the Champions League, but clearly not, and the agitation to leave is there. Okay, guys, leave your comments below and see you on the next one. Have a good night if you can.